Alfred the Great is known in history for his battles against the Viking invaders, and he won a number of key battles against them. He also was involved in the conversion of a Viking leader, and he helped to spread Christianity within his kingdom of Wessex. But more than being a skilled military leader, he was a learned and calm man, who demonstrated great leadership throughout his time on the throne of Wessex. As time went on, his reputation for being a scholar and a man who promoted education and writing histories developed, and he gained the nickname the Great in the 1500s. At the time of his ruling, England was divided into different kingdoms and lands, and it was a very turbulent time in which he was ruling, with invasion and hostility a constant threat. Alfred wished for peace a significant amount of time, and he changed things in England forever. But what happened in his demise and death? Join us today as we look at the painful death of Alfred the Great, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Alfred was born around the year 849 and was the son of Ethelwulf, the King of Wessex, and his wife Osburh. His biographer Asser wrote that, in the years of our Lord's incarnation, 849, Alfred, King of the Anglo-Saxons, was born in Wantage, which at the time was a royal estate. He was the youngest of 6 children, and his elder brother Athelstan was later appointed the sub-king of Kent, and he died in the 850s. His next 3 brothers were kings of Wessex, and his sister was married to Burgred, the King of Mercia, in 853. Alfred's mother was described as a most religious woman, noble by temperament and noble by birth, and she passed these religious qualities on to her son. In 868, Alfred married Ealhswith, who was the daughter of a Mercian nobleman, who was the ealdorman of the Gaeni. This group were a tribal group of Mercia, and together the couple had 5 or 6 children. Alfred's successor was his son Edward the Elder, and Athelflaed, his daughter, became the Lady of the Mercians, and another daughter, Elfrith, married Baldwin II, the Count of Flanders. In 868, Alfred was recorded as fighting alongside Athelred in an attempt to keep the Viking army, the Great Heathen Army, which was commanded by Ivor the Boneless, out of the kingdom of Mercia. There were a number of engagements fought between the Saxons and Vikings at the time, and the Saxons were victorious in a number of battles, but were defeated in a few as well. In April 871, Athelred died, and Alfred came onto the throne of Wessex, despite Athelred leaving 2 sons, who were considered too young to rule. Whilst Alfred was attending to his brother's funeral, the Danes attacked the Saxons whilst he was away, and later defeated them at Wilton. The Viking army did later withdraw, and it's assumed that Alfred paid the Vikings to leave, and hoards have been found which show large sums of Viking silver and gold paid by Alfred. Alfred titled himself the King of the West Saxons, and later labelled himself the King of the Anglo-Saxons, as more of England came under his rule and control, but he was not the first to claim he was the King of the English. One of his greatest victories came in the Battle of Eddington in 878. He pushed the Danes back to their stronghold at Chippenham, and then starved them to the point where they had to negotiate and do a deal with the Saxons. One of the terms of the surrender was that the Danish king Guthrum was to convert to Christianity, and this happened 3 weeks later, and a number of Guthrum's closest leaders were also baptised. Also, Alfred created what was known as a Danelaw in the north of England during these negotiations, and it was said that peace hopefully would have been kept between those living under the Danelaw and the Kingdom of Wessex. Alfred later travelled to Rome, and whilst here he learned how other kings across in Europe had dealt with Viking raiders, and whilst here he came up with a form of taxation for his kingdom. He changed the tax laws in Wessex to make sure that defences could be paid for and maintained, and a system of fortifications called burhs were created to help deal with Viking raids. The raids did resume in 892, and Alfred was in a much stronger position to defend against them now, as he had a mobile field army, a significant number of garrisons and professional soldiers, and he also had a small fleet of ships which would be used on the rivers and estuaries inside of his land. The Danes came across to Wessex initially in 330 ships, and they based themselves in Kent, and they brought their wives and children with them, showing that they intended on settling and colonising England. Alfred negotiated with Haston, a commander of the part of the army, and the Danes were eventually defeated. The Vikings did attempt to break through the English lines, but were later plagued by a lack of food and supplies, and a few years later they withdrew completely. Despite being a successful military leader and commander, Alfred's legacy was also in that he was seen as a reformer and an advocate of education. Alfred was involved in translating works from Latin to English to make sure that his population had a wealth of books that they could learn from. He was inspired in this by Charlemagne, and he created court schools which allowed the nobility to have good access to a good standard of education. Also, those who were not the nobility were allowed to attend, and inside of these schools, the best scholars across Wessex would teach. His influence was to try and help develop Anglo-Saxon culture and society, to make the people more learned. Alfred was known for being a man of education and being level-headed, and he wished for his people to learn in Old English rather than Latin. Danish raids had previously caused chaos with education and learning in the country, but Alfred sought to try and make this better. Shortly before his death, he ordered the creation of the new minster in Winchester, which he hoped would become a mausoleum for he and his family once they had passed away. In terms of his reputation across the kingdom, it was said he was greatly loved, more than all of his brothers, with a universal and profound love, and he was always brought up in royal court. He was seen as more comely in his appearance than his brothers, and more pleasing in manner, speeches and behaviour. In spite of all the demands of the present life, it has been the desire for wisdom, more than anything else together, with the nobility of his birth, which characterised the nature of his noble mind. But on the 26th of October, 899, at around the age of 50 or 51, Alfred the Great passed away. For much of his life he had suffered greatly with pain and illness relating to his stomach and digestive system. His biographer Asser, who wrote down and described a large amount of Alfred's life, documented a description of Alfred's symptoms. The pain Alfred had was harsh and relentless, and it persisted for over 20 years, and the cause remained unknown to the physicians at the time. This led to many people speculating that the king was possessed by a devil, or had been punished by a witch, or a Danish seer. Many of us thought that he may have suffered with an unknown fever or possibly hemorrhoids, but using what we know now about illnesses in the human body, it's interesting to consider that Alfred the Great suffered from Crohn's disease. This causes painful and chronic inflammation of the digestive system and can cause ulcers to form. Doctors still don't know what exactly causes it, and common symptoms of it are abdominal pain, cramping, fever, tiredness and passing blood in stools, of which Alfred was known to have suffered with. Alfred, it's alleged, did manage to work out which foods made his pain worse, such as meat, and may have even eaten a mostly vegetarian diet because of this. Further evidence points towards the king having Crohn's, as it's considered that his grandson King Edred also suffered with similar symptoms and problems. With this he would have been suffering from the pain throughout most of his life, and there would have been little relief for Alfred the Great. His pain must have been difficult to deal with, along with being the King of Wessex, and it was said he tended to have periods where it did not bother him too much. He went from times where the pain was not present, to times where it was so severe that he was unable to leave his room. If Alfred suffered with tuberculosis or colon cancer, then he would not have lived as long as he did, so it's considered that the king died from Crohn's. Alfred was buried for a short period at the Old Minster in Winchester, with his wife and later son, Edward the Elder. 4 years after his death, his body and family's bodies were exhumed and were laid to rest in the new minster. They were there for 211 years, until William the Conqueror demolished the new Minster Abbey, where Alfred was laid to rest. Monks did exhume the bodies of him and his family, and he was reinterred at Hyde Abbey. They were buried before the high altar, but during the reign of Tudor King Henry VIII, many of the Roman Catholic churches and sites were vandalised by the English during the dissolutions of the monasteries. Hyde Abbey was dissolved in 1538, and the graves housing Alfred and his family remained underground, before the construction of a town jail was created on the site. Before the construction began, convicts who were later imprisoned there were sent to prepare the ground, and they discovered the coffins of Alfred and his family. The local priest wrote, "This miscreant's couch amidst the ashes of our Alfred and Edward's, and where once religious silence and contemplation were, only interrupted by the bell of regular observance, the chanting of devotion, now alone resound the clank of the captive's chains and the oaths of the profligate." In digging for the foundation of the mournful edifice, at almost every stroke of the mattock or spade, some ancient sepulchre was violated, the venerable contents of which were treated with marked indignity. On this occasion, a great number of stone coffins were dug up, with a variety of other curious articles, such as chalices, rings, buckles, the leather of shoes and boots, velvet and gold lace belonging to chasubles and other vestments, as also the crook, rims and joints of a beautiful crozier double gilt. Today the remains of Alfred the Great remain lost, and it's not known what happened to them. He was a king who changed England and Wessex for good, and he helped to defeat the Danes a number of times. He was a clever man and an intelligent one, but a king who devoted much of his time to God and religion. He did suffer throughout his life with painful stomach conditions that caused him to waste away, and they later killed him. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.